My administration wants to work with members of both parties to promote clean air and clean water.
Who doesn't want clean air or clean water? I'd like to think every American does. That, of course, was President Trump about a year and a half ago, vowing to promote clean air and water. But actions taken over and over by the Environmental Protection Agency may do just the opposite. The rolling back of vehicle emission standards, for one, and now Trump critics of the EPA are worried that a new rule on asbestos could mean more exposure and not less to the cancer-causing material. Former Governor Christine Todd Whitman back with me to discuss, and she, of course, is also the former head of the EPA. Walk us through this, because deregulation has been a central focus of this administration. Right. And in some cases, it makes sense. Some regulations don't work, or there's redundancy. But in this one, getting back in the asbestos game, why would we want such a thing?
No, you shouldn't. And the only good news about the Scott Pruitt tendency was that he was more bluster, and he'd say things and say he'd roll back things to make headlines, but he didn't understand how complicated legally it was, and he didn't go through the right procedure. So a lot of those are being thrown out by the courts. Andrew Wheeler knows how the process works. I think he's a much more stable human being, and I think he's working more with the agency than before. So,
but why would he want to do this? What American people are saying, bring that asbestos back to the party?
Why are they rolling back on anything? I mean, we know between 200,000 and 300,000 Americans each year die from dirty airborne related causes, and we know that tailpipe emissions are the major cause of that, and yet we're rolling back the tailpipe emission standards. We're doing things that make no sense except for individual industries. That's where they're being done, because they go to the bottom line of some industries, even though the majority, frankly, of the big companies want to do things right, and they are moving forward. But you've got outliers, and they're the ones they're taking advantage of, and they seem to have the president's ear.
Well, President Trump does like the chemical industry. He's very close with Andrew Liveris of Dow Chemical. Liveris is the one who put together those CEO councils for him. He was with President Trump on the campaign trail. But today, the courts have a lot of power here, and we've actually seen a federal court order the EPA to ban a common pesticide that's used in fruits and vegetables, a pesticide that has been linked to child development issues. How did this happen? Who wanted this?
Well, this is, again, it's just a sort of mindless approach to, we're going to roll back every regulation. I agree with you. We ought to look at regulations from time to time. They ought to be revisited, because things move on. We find different way of doing things. We find out things were worse or not as bad as we thought. That's fine. But this seems to be anything that Obama did, we're going to undo, without thinking about, does this make sense for the American people? EPA is all about protecting human health and the environment. That's it.
Do you still consider yourself a Republican?
I'm an Eisenhower Republican. And I believe firmly that the only way to change things is from within, and we still need two parties. A third party has never worked terribly well in this country. But it's getting harder and harder to identify. I'm certainly not one of these kinds of Republicans.
All right. Well, there's a very well-known Democrat, Al Gore, who said this. He, President Trump, has had less of an impact so far than I fear he would. Someone said last year his administration is a blend of malevolence, as I've lost my page, malevolence and incompetence. I think they've made some mistakes in some of the moves they've made. The courts have blocked some of what they wanted to do as a result. Right. Do you agree with that? I mean, I feel like you were alluding to it with Scott Pruitt. They make a lot of noise, but as far as what they actually get done, that would harm the environment. It's somewhat limited.
If you don't do it right, then you're going to get reversed in the courts, because the enabling legislation that set up the Environmental Protection Agency is very precise on what the agency has to consider and when, and all the restrictions around that. So if you don't, you can't just get up one day and say, asbestos is good for you now. You have to say, this is why we think the current standard for asbestos is wrong, and this is the backup study that has been done that tells us that we can put it in a different place. You can't.
You mean more than just Vladimir Putin possibly saying, hey, we produce quite a bit of asbestos over here in Russia. Then of all that's going on right now, what has you most worried?
What it's doing to undermining our fundamentals of government in this country, our respect for the institutions of government, our confidence in the courts and the independence of the judiciary and law enforcement, the damage that's being done to young people in saying that you can denigrate people and judge people by the way they look, by how they worship, by the color of their skin.
Why is this happening? People voted for this.
Well, because people were so frustrated by what they saw as a complete lack of action by Congress. They were scared. They were worried that they weren't going to be able to provide the kind of future for their children that they had, and they wanted to see some action. I think the Bernie Sanders and the Donald Trump voters were two sides of the same coin. They were those same people who were working hard, staying in the same place, not seeing a path forward. And, you know, we've had the best quarter. The last quarter was the best quarter we'd had in 2014, which was only 4 years ago under the much-hated Obama, by the way. But anyway, that's good, but it's only one quarter. And there's more to it than that. It's more than just the economics, about the very fundamentals of our government and what makes the United States of America that people look up to around the world.
The income inequality divide fueled many of those voters. What astounds me is that divide has only worsened.
I know. But he'll get up and say, you know, more blacks and minorities in general are working than ever before.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.